On the morning of Friday, the 14th of September 2007, the quiet streets of Balby and Doncaster carried the unremarkable calm of a school day beginning like any other. Houses stood in their usual stillness, blinds half drawn, and the early sun rested on rows of semis that had seen decades of ordinary family routines. Within one of those homes, a moment was taking shape that no one present could recognize for what it would become. It started with silence, a silence so ordinary, so layered into the rhythm of the household, that it did not draw attention. It was the silence of a teenage boy getting ready for school, or at least appearing to. But beneath that silence, unnoticed by anyone else, something was shifting in a direction that would ultimately fracture a family's world. 14-year-old Andrew Gosden stepped out of bed shortly after 7 a.m., though no one knew exactly when he woke. What is known is that he moved through the house quietly, deliberately, as if careful not to disturb anything around him. The school uniform he was expected to wear, blazer, white shirt, tie, remained untouched. Instead, he pulled out the black jeans and slip-knot t-shirt he wore most often at home, clothes that blended into his reserved personality. There were no raised voices, no arguments, no tension that morning. Everything appeared normal from the outside. But Andrew had already made a decision, one that no one in the house had sensed coming. He stepped into the bathroom, splashed water on his face, and brushed his teeth with the same steady, habitual motions he'd repeated every morning since primary school. If his eyes reflected uncertainty or determination, no one saw it. The house had returned to its usual rhythm. His father had already left for work. His mother was preparing for her shift, and his sister was still upstairs. There was no one in the hallway when he quietly picked up his bag. It was around 8:05 a.m. when Andrew left home. At that moment, he looked like any teenager heading to school. He walked along the same pavement he always did, passing familiar hedges and driveways. Neighbors watering gardens or leaving for work would not have thought twice about the quiet boy walking past. He showed no signs of distress, panic, or secrecy. If anything, his posture was calm, calculated, even, as he moved toward the bus stop he never planned to reach. Instead of heading toward school, Andrew took an unexpected turn toward Doncaster railway station. No one who saw him that morning realized he was diverging from his routine. The walk to the station was not long, but it was deliberate. It led him away from classrooms, teachers, and the predictable structure of his life. The air that morning held the faint coolness of early autumn. Cars hummed past. Footsteps echoed from commuters making their way to work. To everyone else, the town moved forward in its normal tempo. But Andrew, walking toward the station alone, had stepped completely outside that rhythm. When he arrived at the station, he approached one of the ticket counters. He asked for a one-way ticket to London King's Cross, a journey of over 150 miles. The ticket seller later recalled him as quiet, polite, unremarkable. There was nothing in his manner to suggest urgency or fear. The one-way ticket cost only a little more than a return, but for reasons no one will ever fully understand, Andrew insisted on the single fare. He paid in cash. No card trace. No phone. No digital footprint. Everything he did that morning left behind as little trace as possible. He boarded the 9:35 a.m. train to London. CCTV captured him walking to the platform, wearing the black clothes he had chosen instead of his uniform. He carried a small bag, though it held no change of clothes, no chargers, no survival items for an extended trip. Only the bare minimum. The train doors closed, and Andrew found a seat among strangers who did not know they were witnessing the last confirmed sighting of him in his hometown. The countryside blurred by as the train pulled away from Doncaster. Fields fading into towns, then into suburbs, until finally the sprawling complexity of London approached at 11:20 a.m. He was captured again on CCTV leaving King's Cross Station. The footage showed him calmly, almost methodically, walking through the concourse. He blended easily into the flow of commuters, tourists, and students. Nothing about his movements drew attention. He did not look lost. He did not appear frightened. He walked with steady steps, slipping into London's vastness as though he had rehearsed this moment. And then he vanished. After he walked out of the station doors, no one saw him again. No camera captured his next steps. No witness came forward with a definitive sighting. He did not check into a hostel, withdraw money, buy food, or make any recorded transaction. In one of the busiest, most surveilled cities in Europe, Andrew disappeared as if the city absorbed him entirely. Back in Doncaster, his absence went unnoticed at first. School assumed he was ill. His family believed he had followed his routine. It wasn't until later that afternoon, when he did not return home, that concern began to build. His parents checked his room, contacted the school, questioned neighbors, and retraced steps that Andrew had walked thousands of times. Nothing made sense. Nothing had been out of place that morning. But as hours turned into evening, and evening into the first sleepless night, the household felt the dawning weight of something far beyond a runaway scenario in London. Life continued in its swirling, overwhelming rhythm. Trains filled and emptied, crowds surged through King's Cross, and thousands of people crossed the same pavement Andrew had walked. But he did not reappear. No bank activity. No calls. No emails. No belongings found. Just a moment captured on camera. A teenage boy stepping calmly into a city of millions, and then an abrupt, inexplicable silence. The disappearance of Andrew Gosden began not with chaos, not with an argument, not with a moment of emotional eruption. It began with an ordinary morning, a quiet walk, a train ride, and a boy who seemed to have slipped from the world the moment he stepped into London. Andrew Gosden's disappearance could not be understood without stepping back into the quiet, intricate world he lived in before the morning he left home. His life from the outside seemed stable and predictable, a neatly arranged blend of school, family routines, and solitary interests. But within that apparent simplicity existed a boy whose mind worked differently from those around him, whose inner world carried a depth most people never recognized, and whose silence often masked thoughts no one else could access. Andrew was born in 1993, the second child in a close-knit family that valued routine, calm, and structure. Growing up in Balby, he occupied a space defined by academic excellence and introverted comfort. His parents, Kevin and Glenys, nurtured a household that prioritized stability. They were attentive, considerate, and deeply invested in the well-being of both their children. His older sister, Charlotte, shared a bond with him that evolved quietly over the years, not loud or expressive, but steady and familiar, shaped by shared childhood routines, long school mornings, and evenings spent in the same house with separate but parallel hobbies. Andrew was not the kind of child who sought attention. He preferred to move gently through the world. From a young age, Andrew displayed a remarkable intelligence. Teachers described him as a student who learned quickly, absorbed information silently, and excelled without asking for help. He had an uncanny ability to memorize details, understand patterns, and learn subjects with little effort. By the time he entered his teens, he was considered academically gifted, particularly in mathematics. But this gift came with a quiet intensity. He rarely showed emotion about his achievements. Praise made him uncomfortable, and attention, even positive attention, seemed to push him deeper into himself. At school, Andrew was respected, though not widely known. He attended Macaulay Catholic High School, where he maintained excellent grades and rarely caused trouble. He wasn't socially isolated, but he wasn't socially driven either. He existed in the spaces between groups, moving through hallways like a shadow, present, polite, and unobtrusive. Friends who later spoke about him described him as kind, gentle, and thoughtful, though reserved to the point that his internal life remained largely inaccessible. Even to those closest to him, his interests leaned toward solitude. Andrew loved video games, particularly those that required strategic thinking. He enjoyed listening to metal bands, collecting CDs, and exploring music that spoke to emotions he didn't express openly. He sometimes stayed awake late into the night with headphones on, lost in soundscapes that allowed him to retreat further into himself. He also had small obsessions, puzzles, patterns, unusual facts, things that occupied his mind without requiring social interaction. One of the most significant markers of Andrew's personality was his aversion to unnecessary attention. He disliked loud environments, preferred predictability, and felt most at ease in spaces where he could control the atmosphere. He rarely showed frustration, and when he did, it came out quietly, a withdrawn silence rather than confrontation. Those who knew him saw him as independent and sensible, the kind of teenager who always came home on time, respected rules, and avoided trouble. His home life reflected the same calm structure. Mornings were orderly, evenings were consistent, and weekends often involved familiar activities: gaming, reading, listening to music, or spending time with the family. Kevin and Glennis had no reason to suspect Andrew carried any hidden turmoil. Although he was quieter than most boys his age, he exhibited no signs of distress. He was present at family meals, participated in conversations, and maintained his responsibilities. There were no arguments before he disappeared, no behavioral changes, no secret communications discovered afterward. His life appeared smooth, even uneventful. Despite this outward calm, Andrew was not a child without complexity. He carried an inward intensity, a subtle but unmistakable sense of distance from the world around him. His intelligence sometimes isolated him. His quietness often made his thoughts opaque. Teachers said he was bright but reserved. Family members recalled him as kind but inward. Friends remembered him as someone who listened more than he spoke. In retrospect, those qualities took on new weight. At the time, they seemed harmless, the traits of a focused, introverted, academically driven boy. One detail that emerged later was Andrew's sensitivity to stress. Though he performed brilliantly at school, he sometimes grew overwhelmed by academic pressure, though he never discussed it openly. He disliked school trips, disliked changes to routine, and disliked events that disrupted the predictability he relied on. But he hid these discomforts well, masking them behind polite compliance and quiet behavior. There were moments, subtle ones, that hinted at an inward life no one fully understood. He sometimes withdrew unexpectedly, sitting alone in his room for hours. He occasionally seemed deep in thought, disconnected from the present. He would avoid arguments, retreating instead into silence. These behaviors never raised alarms. They were seen as typical of a quiet, academically inclined teenager. In the weeks leading up to his disappearance, nothing seemed different. Andrew attended school regularly. He completed assignments on time. He laughed at jokes, interacted with friends, and went through every routine without deviation. His parents noticed nothing unusual about his behavior. He showed no signs of distress, no hints of a plan, no indications that he was preparing for anything beyond the normal rhythm of his life. Yet there were small details, tiny, almost invisible, that only gained meaning after he disappeared. He had skipped the school bus on at least one day before, choosing to walk home alone without explanation. He had gone to bed early several nights in a row, though no one thought much of it. He had mentioned nothing about London, had shown no interest in traveling there, and had no known friends or contacts in the city. But on the morning of his disappearance, he left home with an intention that no one saw, no one sensed, and no one could predict. The weight of what happened that morning, the choice to walk past school, To withdraw money, to buy a one-way ticket, became even more haunting when contrasted with the gentle, organized, introverted boy who had never broken a rule before. Everything about his personality suggested caution, not impulsiveness. Everything about his routines suggested stability, not spontaneity. Everything about his past behavior suggested predictability, not a sudden departure to London without explanation. To understand the shock of his disappearance, one must understand the quiet, steady child he had always been. His actions on the morning of the 14th of September did not align with anything in his past. They stood apart, a deliberate, unexplained break from the patterns of a boy who had never once stepped outside the known edges of his life. And so, when Andrew walked calmly through King's Cross Station that morning, disappearing into a city he had never visited alone, he wasn't just stepping out of sight. He was stepping completely outside the boundaries of everything his family, friends, and teachers believed they understood about him. When Andrew failed to come home that Friday afternoon, the first sensation inside the Gosden household was mild confusion rather than alarm. He was punctual by nature, almost rigidly so, and it was unusual for him to be late. But even then, his parents did not imagine anything extraordinary. The buses sometimes delayed. School detentions occasionally happened. A slow walk home was not unheard of. At first, the house simply felt slightly off balance, as if a familiar rhythm had missed one beat but would realign itself at any moment. Kevin and Glennis tried to reassure themselves. They checked the clock, checked the window, checked again. But as minutes became hours, light began to fade from the sky, and evening settled over Balby. The air inside the house grew tense, heavy with a feeling none of them had a name for yet. Andrew had never wandered off before. He had never skipped responsibilities. He had never made a decision without telling someone. Even the smallest changes in his day, like walking a different route from school, were things he mentioned. His absence felt unnatural, out of character, inexplicable. By early evening, worry tightened into genuine fear. His parents tried calling friends from school. None had seen him. They contacted teachers, hoping he might have stayed late or attended an after-school event. But he had not been at school at all. His absence was complete and unexplained. Glennis walked room to room in the house, calling his name out of instinct, even though she knew he was not there. Kevin drove slowly through the nearby streets, scanning pavements, parks, and shortcuts Andrew sometimes took on foot. But the roads were empty. The familiar places yielded nothing. When night fell, so did the realization that something was very wrong. The family contacted the police. At first, the response was procedural. A missing teenager on a Friday evening did not automatically trigger urgency. Runaways were common, misunderstandings even more so. Officers asked the usual questions. Had Andrew argued with anyone? Had he been stressed? Shown signs of wanting to leave? Had anything in the home environment changed? His parents answered no to everything. Andrew was academically gifted, responsible, and introverted. He had never broken routine before, but as the hours continued to pass, even routine procedure began to feel insufficient. The house, usually warm and steady, now felt disoriented. Every sound outside, every car passing, every footstep on the pavement, every distant voice pulled the family toward the windows in hopes that it might be Andrew returning home. But the night remained empty. The first night without Andrew was long and hollow. No one slept. Kevin and Glennis replayed every moment of the morning, questioning whether they had missed any subtle sign, any half-sentence, any hidden meaning in his behavior. Nothing came to mind. Andrew had eaten breakfast, dressed, and left the house exactly as he always did. There had been no hesitation in his steps, no unusual tone in his voice, no indication that he had planned anything other than an ordinary school day. The next morning, when the sun rose, It illuminated a family in the same place emotionally as the night before. Confused, frightened, exhausted. Police returned to collect more details. Officers searched local areas, visited bus stops, checked parks, and spoke to neighbors. They initiated contact with teachers, gathering records to confirm Andrew's absence from school. They contacted hospitals. They monitored transport routes within Doncaster. But nothing pointed to his location. The day grew heavier with every hour. The family began to feel the increasing friction between their fear and the lack of answers. It was around this time that police discovered Andrew had not boarded the school bus that morning. This detail was the first sharp deviation from normality. It meant he had intentionally changed his route. It meant he had made a decision, one no one understood yet, to walk in a direction that did not align with his routine. Detectives began reconstructing the morning timeline. They confirmed he had left home shortly after 8 a.m. They confirmed he had not reached school. But from the time he stepped off his street until the moment he reached the railway station, no one had seen him. He moved invisibly, unnoticed, through the fabric of his own town. The breakthrough came the following day, when police checked CCTV footage at Doncaster Station. The grainy video showed a figure, his clothes unmistakable, buying a ticket at the counter. Then a second camera captured him walking calmly along the platform. He had bought a one-way ticket to London. There was no hesitation in his steps, no sign of second thoughts. It was a simple walk forward. When police informed the Gosdens of this discovery, the shock was enormous. London? Andrew had shown no interest in visiting London. He had no friends there, no family connections, no online communities that anyone knew of. He had never discussed it, never expressed curiosity about the city, never mentioned wanting to go anywhere alone. For a boy who disliked loud spaces, crowds, unpredictability, London was the last place anyone could imagine him choosing voluntarily. Even with this revelation, nothing made sense. If he had planned to leave, why hadn't he taken anything with him? No overnight bag, no change of clothes, no phone, no wallet, no preparation. His school blazer still hung untouched in his room. His coins and banknotes remained neatly arranged in his desk drawer. Except for the £200 he had withdrawn, money he had saved meticulously over years. A detail that suddenly took on chilling significance. That evening, the police extended their search beyond Doncaster. They contacted British Transport Police and the Metropolitan Police. Officers checked CCTV footage at King's Cross, and there he was again, walking out of the station, stepping into the crowd, disappearing into London's vast sprawl without turning back, without pausing, without a trace of uncertainty. The moment the Gosdens saw that footage, their son, small and alone, swallowing himself into the endless movement of a city, was the moment fear sharpened into something deeper. Andrew had made a choice, but the purpose of that choice remained terrifyingly hidden. The first 48 hours closed with more questions than answers. Andrew had walked away from everything familiar. He had traveled 150 miles to a place he had no known reason to visit. And after that final step caught on camera, he vanished into a city where millions pass unnoticed every day. Once investigators confirmed that Andrew had arrived in London and walked out of King's Cross Station, the focus of the search shifted abruptly from Doncaster to the capital. The shift felt monumental. The difference between searching for a boy in a quiet northern town and searching for him in one of the largest, most crowded cities in Europe. The scale alone was overwhelming. In Doncaster, every street was familiar. Every bus driver might have recognized him, and every area could be searched by foot. But London was something else entirely. Millions of people moved through its streets every day. Thousands passed in and out of King's Cross, each one a blur in a city too vast for individual memory. The initial investigative step in London was to reconstruct, Andrew's movements immediately after he left the station. CCTV cameras inside King's Cross captured him clearly at 11:20 a.m., walking with a steady pace toward the exit. But London's camera network in 2007 was not the interconnected system it is today. There were gaps between coverage zones, blind spots where the city swallowed someone into anonymity, and areas where cameras existed but footage wasn't preserved long enough. Metropolitan Police began combing through hours of tape from surrounding streets, shops, and transport lines, hoping Andrew would reappear on another camera, a side street, a bus platform, a shop entrance. But he didn't. Not a single camera caught him after the moment he stepped out of the station doors. Detectives attempted to determine which route he might have taken on foot. They created a radius extending outward from King's Cross. They mapped all possible directions, toward Camden, toward Islington, toward Euston Road, or deeper into central London. Each direction contained hundreds of shops, dozens of side streets, countless residential blocks. Officers canvassed the nearby streets, asking shopkeepers if they had seen a quiet teenage boy in black clothes. They spoke with bus drivers, taxi ranks, nearby cafes, hotels, and bookstores. No one recalled him. Andrew had effectively walked into a void, a space too large and too chaotic to hold onto a single unaccompanied teenager for more than a moment. In Doncaster, the family clung desperately to any developments. When the police explained how vast the London search area was, the reality crashed over them like a wave. The distance between what they knew and what they could imagine grew painfully wide. All they had were questions. Why London? Why alone? Why without a return ticket? What had he intended to do when he stepped out of the station? Where had he planned to go? No answer emerged. As the hours passed, media attention intensified. Andrew's disappearance story spread rapidly across regional networks, then national outlets. News presenters recounted the baffling details. A bright, responsible 14-year-old boy had withdrawn his life savings, purchased a one-way ticket to London, and vanished within minutes of stepping onto the streets. Journalists highlighted the mystery of his clothing switch, the lack of a mobile phone, and the absence of emotional or behavioral changes in the days prior. Public reaction was immediate, sympathetic, shocked, and deeply concerned. But media support came with challenges. Tip lines exploded with calls, most well-intentioned, but many impossible to verify. Some claimed to have seen Andrew in various parts of London, wandering through a shopping district, sitting alone on a bench, entering a museum, riding a bus. Others believed they had seen him elsewhere in the UK. Every message was recorded, evaluated, cross-checked against CCTV grids. Not one sighting could be confirmed. The more the story spread, the more false leads the police had to filter through, each draining precious time and resources. Psychologists began analyzing the case as well, offering potential explanations that range from introspective withdrawal to hidden emotional struggles. But every theory lacked foundation. Andrew had shown no signs of depression, no indications of wanting to escape, no changes in mood that suggested internal turmoil. His teachers described him as bright and steady. His parents described him as gentle and content. Mental health experts could only speak hypothetically, unable to identify a pattern that fit the situation cleanly. One theory suggested he might have traveled to London for a specific event, a concert, a museum, an exhibition, a shop specializing in something rare. Investigators checked venues, music stores, gaming centers, and public events occurring on the 14th of September. None provided any link to Andrew. Another theory proposed he might have gone to meet someone, perhaps someone he knew only online. But digital forensics provided no evidence of hidden accounts, unknown contacts, or secret communications. Andrew had no social media, no mobile phone, and no internet footprint that indicated outside interaction. The search through his computer revealed nothing unusual, No chat logs, no websites that reflected secret plans, no emails suggesting parallel friendships or secret conversations. Police considered whether he could have been targeted or influenced by someone. But given that Andrew left home calmly, traveled alone, purchased the ticket himself, and walked independently through the station, the theory seemed unlikely. No one appeared to have been with him. No one approached him in the footage. He displayed no hesitation in his steps as each possibility was examined and dismissed. The investigation encountered a growing truth that Andrew's disappearance did not follow any known pattern. It was neither a typical runaway case nor a case of grooming, abduction, or documented distress. It was an anomaly, a singular event without precedent or comparison. London police continued to distribute posters throughout the city. Officers visited youth hostels, shelters, libraries, parks, and arcades. They searched underground stations, walked along streets leading away from King's Cross, and spoke to staff at charity centers that offered support to vulnerable youth. Still nothing. No trace, no memory, no sign that Andrew had passed through any of these places. Meanwhile, each passing night felt like a lifetime for the Gosden family. They replayed his final moments at home, searching their memories for hidden meaning. They wondered if he had been masking stress, hiding fear, or carrying a burden he could not articulate. But the silence that followed his disappearance produced only more questions. Investigators soon realized that after 11:20 a.m., after those final seconds of CCTV footage, Andrew could have walked into any street, any shop, any building, any underground line. He could have changed direction at any point. He could have walked for minutes or hours. In London, anonymity is effortless. Once he stepped into the crowd, the difficulty of tracing him multiplied exponentially. The investigation was now confronted with a chilling possibility. Andrew Gosden had become invisible, not because someone hid him, but because the environment itself absorbed him completely. And, with each hour that passed, the city that had swallowed him showed no indication of ever revealing where he had gone next. In the weeks following Andrew Gosden's disappearance, the search effort in London widened far beyond the immediate perimeter of King's Cross. What began as a localized inquiry expanded into a sprawling, citywide operation involving multiple police divisions, specialist units, and countless volunteers. Yet the deeper investigators pushed, the more the vastness of London worked against them. Every new search location seemed to multiply into 10 more. Every potential sighting opened another uncertain direction. Despite all efforts, Andrew's presence remained hauntingly absent. Detectives began canvassing areas where teenagers were known to spend time alone: arcades, music shops, internet cafes, youth hostels, and libraries. The reasoning was simple. If Andrew had come to London with a specific interest in music or subcultures, these areas might hold significance. Officers visited independent record stores, especially those known for alternative or metal music, genres Andrew liked. They showed his photo to shop owners, clerks, and regulars who spent hours browsing CDs and band merchandise. Most people shook their heads. A few hesitated, saying that they might have seen someone similar, but their memories blurred among countless other teenagers passing through each week. None of the accounts could be confirmed. In Camden, a district known for alternative culture, police searched markets, alleyways, and shops where young people often gathered. They posted flyers in doorways, telephone poles, and windows. Foot traffic was enormous. Thousands passed through Camden daily, but no one recognized Andrew. The area's heavy flow of visitors from across the UK and beyond made it nearly impossible to trace any unfamiliar face. Youth hostels were checked carefully. Staff reviewed registration logs, but Andrew had not checked into any. The absence of identification, luggage, or money would have made it difficult for him to stay in such places, suggesting he had not sought accommodation. Police then examined homeless shelters and drop-in centers, which sometimes attracted young people traveling alone. Still no trace. Staff members were shown Andrew's picture repeatedly in the following days and weeks. Nothing. As the search intensified, public involvement soared. Posters with Andrew's photograph spread across London, in train stations, bus stops, cafes, schools, and convenience stores. His face, gentle, youthful, framed by glasses, became a symbol of a boy lost in a massive, indifferent city. Volunteers from Doncaster traveled to London to hand out leaflets. Strangers approached officers, offering help. Even musicians and public figures in the alternative scene shared his photo online and in print, hoping someone might remember him. But with public attention came a flood of false leads. Calls poured into police lines reporting possible sightings. A boy who looked like Andrew sleeping on a park bench, standing near a bus station, entering a shop, walking alone through a quiet street. Each call was checked, each location investigated, each description recorded. But every promising lead dissolved almost immediately. Sometimes the boy in question was located and found to be someone else. Other times the sighting was too vague to follow. And often, the tip was not malicious, just an understandable attempt by people to help in a case that felt deeply unsettling. As the weeks stretched into months, the psychological toll on Andrew's family deepened. Kevin and Glenys found themselves trapped between hope and dread, each day a cycle of waiting for news that never came. Their house felt strangely quiet. A silence that had once been comforting now felt suffocating. Andrew's bedroom remained untouched, a preserved fragment of the life he had left behind, filled with the small personal details that made his disappearance feel all the more surreal. His school books sat neatly on his desk. His games remained organized. His headphones rested where he last placed them. Nothing in the room held clues, yet everything in it reminded them of the incomprehensible absence. Police specialists began examining the case from psychological and behavioral angles. They reviewed Andrew's habits, strengths, vulnerabilities, and emotional tendencies. The absence of any sign of distress before he left puzzled analysts. If he had intended to run away, why had there been no conflict, no behavioral shift, no indication of dissatisfaction? If he had been planning something long-term, why had he taken no supplies? No change of clothes, no phone, no identification. Even cash, his life savings, was withdrawn but largely unspent. One theory suggested that Andrew might have traveled to London for a specific, deeply personal reason, something internal, perhaps not shared with anyone. This theory considered the possibility of a private emotional burden, something he neither discussed nor showed outwardly. But again, this remained speculative. Nothing in his behavior pointed clearly toward depression, anxiety, or crisis. Another theory proposed that Andrew might have intended to return home, but became overwhelmed in London, disoriented by the noise, movement, or scale of the city. A boy accustomed to quiet routine, who avoided crowds and disliked sudden changes, might have struggled in such a chaotic environment. Perhaps he sought a quiet space and encountered danger or misfortune. Yet this too lacked evidence. Investigators then explored the possibility of voluntary disappearance, fueled by curiosity or exploration. Teenagers sometimes seek independence or anonymity in moments of identity formation. Yet Andrew had not shown signs of rebellion. He had not gathered belongings. He had not told a friend or left a note. He had not behaved impulsively before. This was perhaps the most difficult contradiction. He had acted with calm precision that morning, but without any outward motivation. London's underground network became another focal point. Officers reviewed passenger patterns and contacted Transport for London staff at major stations. But in 2007, not all stations kept comprehensive CCTV archives, and many systems automatically erased footage after short periods. If Andrew had entered the underground after leaving King's Cross, the trail might have vanished before police even began reviewing it. Police also considered darker possibilities. London, with its vast size, held countless risks, from accidental harm to predatory individuals. But again, no evidence pointed definitively toward foul play. Andrew had not looked distressed in the footage. No one was seen approaching him. No sudden movement indicated he had been followed. As the investigation expanded, one haunting reality began to form. Every possible direction in the case led to nothing. Every explanation contained a contradiction. Every theory lacked evidence. Every lead dissolved into uncertainty. Andrew had arrived in London at one of the busiest transport hubs in the country, walked through its concourse, stepped outside, and vanished into silence. As weeks slowly turned into months, the case of Andrew Gosden became heavier, more labyrinthine, and increasingly shaped by the weight of time. The initial urgency that had driven the early investigation, frantic searches, widespread poster campaigns, frantic checks across London, gradually shifted into a colder, more methodical phase. Leads grew quiet. Tips slowed. The once steady stream of possible sightings narrowed until it amounted to occasional, unverified whispers. And the silence surrounding Andrew's disappearance began to feel almost physical, stretching across every unanswered question, like a veil no one could lift. With each passing month, detectives returned again and again to the same starting point. Andrew stepping onto the concourse at King's Cross. Everything beyond that moment was conjecture. There was no second CCTV clip of him walking down a road, no witness recalling his face, no transaction indicating movement, no digital trail that revealed intention. It was as if London, a city of infinite documentation, had chosen, in that one moment, to let him dissolve into its background. The Metropolitan Police, recognizing how unusual the case had become, brought in additional teams to review the investigation. These professionals re-examined the known facts, looking not for new clues, but for overlooked patterns. They reviewed the timeline minute by minute, cross-referenced Andrew's movements with train schedules, and mapped every possible exit route from King's Cross. They studied his body language on CCTV, the calm posture, the steady gait, the lack of hesitation. Experts in human behavior noted that he did not appear distressed or lost. He seemed purposeful, though the purpose remained invisible. Detectives returned repeatedly to Andrew's parents to conduct deeper and more sensitive re-interviews. These were not meant to accuse, but to uncover any hidden emotional layers Andrew might have concealed. Families often miss subtle internal struggles, feelings of isolation, quiet fear, or private pressures. Kevin and Glennis answered every question with painful, painstaking detail. They described Andrew's routines, his quiet nature, his lack of confrontational behavior, his dislike of chaos, his academic abilities, and his aversion to crowds. They dug through memories trying to find anything, a comment, a sudden shift, an expression that might offer meaning. But nothing emerged. Andrew had been stable, predictable, and seemingly content. Psychologists reviewed the possibility that Andrew might have been masking something profound, emotional strain, social pressure, existential questions common in gifted teenagers, or an internal experience he could not articulate. But masking typically leaves traces: changes in appetite, sleep disruption, withdrawal from hobbies, irritability. Andrew exhibited none. Even with hindsight, his family and teachers struggled to identify any behavioral deviation. Police explored his belongings again. His room remained untouched, a museum of structure and calmness. His computer revealed no new contacts, no coded emails, no hidden profiles. His search history reflected only his interests: music, gaming, academic topics, nothing relating to travel, London, runaway guides, or self-harm. No diary existed. No notes. No secret messages. It was as though his internal world remained sealed, even after he was no longer there. As public attention remained strong, media outlets revisited the story months later. Documentaries highlighted the bizarre absence of clues. Newspapers published renewed appeals. Interviews with the Gosden family painted a portrait of parents who were not simply grieving, but suspended, caught in an agonizing state, where grief could not be completed because hope had not fully died. That combination made the loss sharper, more disorienting. Andrew was not confirmed dead, yet not found alive. He was neither mourned nor recovered. He existed in a liminal space, a ghost without certainty.